Well, well, can you believe it? We are now on the downhill side of the course. This is for week 5. We're only going to be doing essentially, or for class 5, and we're only essentially going to be doing a total of 9. So when you get into this one, you've seen pretty much the basics. I've sent you quite a few things. We've talked about quite a few things. My major concern is, excuse me, that you will get what you have sort of coordinated around your final synthesis projects. What I'm seeing thus far has been very exciting. Tiffany's got a terrific one. I've asked her if she'd be kind enough to give us a complete rundown on the process. Hans is the same way. He's got a terrific topic. When we meet next Monday, I'll be giving you a copy of the actual policy that the UMS system put into effect without a whole lot of planning, I might add. And he's going to talk about the why. We had a long discussion on Monday night with Charisse about the fact that she's got a very, very interesting one from an economic, legal point of view. So good things are happening. So what are we doing in 5? In 5, we're talking about the fact that policy that is effective engages the stakeholders who will find themselves affected by the policy. The first set of material you look at comes out of the outfit up in New Jersey. I much like their material, there's no question. It's very, very good. And basically, they're talking about citizen participation. Now, I have a bias. Clearly, going back to the days of John Dewey, citizen participation is the basis of the American education system. It is owned by, serves, and has a right to be assessed by its own stakeholders. One of the things that there is a wonderful little chart in there. I encourage you to look at it. I think it will be helpful. It compares interactive planning, which is where we want to be, with the more traditional style. Conventional is the word that they use, which is okay, but it really doesn't bring into focus what is needed for the policy to truly be owned by people. Some of the key words, we did a lot last week with transparency. We talked a little bit about engagement. We talked about ownership. All of these evolve out of this interactive process. And I think it's really, really helpful. The other thing they put in that I really like, they're good with charts. We don't get all the pictures. I don't understand. I'm not enough of a computer specialist to understand why we have some noise in the background again. This quasi-public thing is difficult. They have a chart that talks about what does it mean to be passive participant, to be a passive participant. What does it mean to be an active or interactive participant? These are very critical differences. And if you're a passive receptive, your sense of ownership of what's actually going on in the policy design, implementation, and assessment steps are nowhere near as intense as they are if it were talking about a truly active engagement. Okay, let's move on and look at a couple of other things. One of the other things they do that I think is very helpful, I have used this as recently as 2 weeks ago. I've been asked to serve on the executive board of a community development organization here in town being Hagerstown. And one of the things they're talking about is, well, how do we really get our membership, the ones that we represent, to support what we're trying to do, to take full ownership? We certainly are, or wouldn't be on the board if I didn't feel that the people are genuinely focused on trying to be connected with and representative of their constituencies. So one of the things that we use are first of all, are the 6 goals for public involvement in the policy formation process. I would encourage you to look at them, and based on the degree that you've had, and I'm sure you've all had experience somewhere in the process of working with an organization, whether it's a civic organization, whether it's a church, it may very well be the school that your children or grandchildren go to. All those things have the opportunity for civic participation. The second thing that's worth looking at, because, and we've done training on this, the community college that I retired from regularly ran civic skill development training opportunities One of the things we discovered many years ago was that a lot of these civic groups had lots of very able and dedicated people, but they were not prepared to engage the necessary people in that advocacy model, which you looked at for this week, for the class that met on Monday. And advocacy is very important because only through advocacy, only through coalition building and bringing special needs together will you see the kind of changes occur that one is after, or will bring to cessation those activities that people are upset with. I always enjoy when I'm teaching this course to look at the newspaper. Two things in the most recent newspaper. There has been a great deal of, and I'll use the German term, Sturmendrang in Washington County. They came up with a very, very good idea, but then they didn't really do adequate pre-policy formation planning. They built, the County Council on Aging has been a kind of a homeless wandering group from building to building to building. They finally got sufficient state funds and regional funds so they can have their own facility. And I am one that agrees they put it on the community college campus. A couple of reasons for that. They will be able to draw down a number of services that you wouldn't have if you built yourself a freestanding. There are computer labs there. There are two and a half cafeterias, a library if you need it, a number of things that are good there. Bus service, such as it is in Washington County. We fought that battle, and that would be a whole other story. Bus service is available for those that want it, but they didn't plan properly. And so they were told, very frankly, that what they had originally planned was not going to be acceptable. Well, there was a meeting reported in the paper yesterday. Stakeholders came together. The policies are being revised. The county ponied up another $250,000, so they're able to do what they needed to do. The same thing is true. There are obviously all over the state of Maryland, there are population changes. And two of the older elementary schools in Washington County are no longer serving neighborhoods that have full-blown populations of pre-K to fifth grade clients, I guess you'd call them. So they're doing some changing, but they want to make very sure that what they're doing is consistent with the needs and expectations of the people who have devoted decades to supporting those schools. And there was some ongoing dialogue. That is what the civic skills and the advocacy is really all about. Okay, if you look at one of the things that is in the set of slides that you have, Tiffany has described what she's going to do as a kind of a way to do a simulation of how one could do, with perhaps a little bit more involvement, the development of the policy that she's going to be reporting on. And I think that's a wonderful idea. And if you look at the model in those slides, that is exactly what they're talking about doing. They talk about doing the research necessary to create your database, take your database, build it into an advocacy program, and then conduct a simulation of your advocacy activity, and some other people will play the quote-unquote devil's advocate, and in the long run, they'll be far better off. One of the other things that we ought to look at as we wrap this up is the categories of civic competence. The very last thing they talk about. They're very good. They talk about, for example, first of all, you have intellectual competence that needs to be developed. That has a lot to do with research. That has a lot to do with designing language that is utilitarian, meaning it can be understood by a variety of constituents. It talks about participative, and that harks back to what we said when we talked about civic skills. It also talks about one that I would probably not have written it myself in the way they did, because they after they've gone through the intellectual and participative, they come back and talk about values. Well, from my experience, values drive those preceding two concepts. So you would be better off if you did a values assessment first, and then intellectual, and then participative. The most important one then, of course, comes to you need to establish principles, basic principles that drive whatever organization it is that you represent. And those principles will guide policy formation, policy implementation, policy assessment, and then, where necessary, policy revision. So, very interesting stuff. I hope you're still enjoying it. I certainly am. And the discussions I'm having with you are always very enjoyable. See you on Monday.